Teshile, welcome to the AWAM Tibetan Buddhist Institute and our Sunday meditation, our Sunday class looking at the essentials of Tibetan Buddhism and also our view of it in terms of how we evolve into these kinds of practices and what can we do to actually get better in terms of what we do in our life and so forth. So we are beginning today, following up for where we were last week, and looking at it, we're going to start with taking a deep breath, relaxing our brain, our calm, and just rest in that for a little bit. Go into deep peace if you can. And then a short refuge prayer. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha most excellent, for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we are in chapter 12 of the text, and looking at the second training of the path of Tantra. And so here we're looking at different forms of meditation, and we have gone through various aspects of that, the preliminary practices, and we're up now to the point of the mandala offerings. And so there's only one more after this. So having purified our body, speech, and mind, we now make these offerings, all that is of value to the Buddhas, the past, present, and future. So that's a way of understanding it. It's a symbolic way, of course, but because they don't really need anything, but we make these as a way of showing our effort, our commitment to this. So they don't need them. But this builds our merit for doing advanced practices, is the way that this is understood. And then it also helps in cutting through our own attachments to things. And that's one of the key things that the Buddha talked about as a problem, that we're attached to things. And when we're so attached to different kinds of things, it makes it difficult to overcome those as obstacles in attaining liberation. So in general, there are three different levels here: Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakayha. So Nirmanakaya is an outer offering, and then remember, Nirmanakaya is the representation like of the body of the historical Buddha, a physical representation. So this one is an outer offering, so it may include an offering plate with stones, rice, or other materials, and we're going to be looking at those kind of things today. It often involves then reciting a mantra as a part of that with focused mind. So it's also an aspect of mind training as a part of this. The second one, the Sambhogakaya, or inner offering, involves visualizing and then multiplying our body to offer it to each of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So we visualize the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and that we are making these offerings to them in that case. The third one is Dharmakayha, or the secret offering, sometimes referred to, that involves meditation in our innate Buddha nature as an offering. So it's not a physical kind of an offering in that case, but an offering of our very nature, if you will. So there are three principal symbolic representations for making these offerings. And so I want to illustrate and show you some of that. We're not going to do all of these today, but the most elaborate one is called the 37-point offering. And I actually made an attachment to the notice for today, so you can go back and you can look at that. But here is an example of that. So you need these rings in order to do that. And then you fill the rings either with rice or with stones. This one is filled with different kinds of stones. Don't know if I can get it to where you can see it inside without spilling the whole thing. I'm going to tilt it just a little bit. You can see the rocks. Whoops. You can see the rocks that are inside of that. Excuse me a second. And then it has this little cap that goes on the top. There's actually 3 levels of rings there. The bottom one is upside down, so it forms the base for that. And then the second one is a middling version called the 7-point mandala offering. And so that one is one that takes place on a plate. Now, this is a little paper plate, so it can be that simple, or it could be something in some nice china or whatever that you want. It could be a metal kind of thing. And then we use rice. So I have this little bowl of rice that can be done as a part of this. And so in this one, I'll show you just briefly this one. The 37 one takes a lot of time, and I don't have a big enough setting that I can actually do this to illustrate it. But in this one, so this is a bowl of rice, and this one has 7 different points. So it's the 7-point mandala offering. So the plate basically is the mandala. And so we do the rice and comes in with that. And so we start with the 4 cardinal directions. So we take some rice and we put it down in the east, which is the closest to us. And then we go circular, going around clockwise. And so from the east, we go to the south, out at the edge as much as we can, and then we go to the north, and then we go to the west. So no, southwest, north, and west. So we go around those 4 in the 4 cardinal directions, and then we do a representation of the Mount Meru, the sun and the moon. We start with the sun and the moon, and those go to either side, but inside of the 4 that are already there. So we put another little pile there for the sun, and one for the moon, and then one for Mount Meru, which is considered to be the ultimate center of the universe from the ancient point of view, from various religious traditions in that area of India and other places. And so then we have our little offering bowl here, if you will. And we count, that's 1. And so if you're doing these and you're counting, then you do that, then you pour it back out. So I'll pour this back into the bowl, and then we start all over again. Count number 2, and so forth, going around that in that way. But the simplest way to do this, particularly for us in the West, and depending on how much time that you have, is one that is a very simple way, making a hand gesture or a mudra for doing this. And so the hand gesture is putting your hands together, and it looks like this. Okay, so symbolically, see if I can get this over to the side a little bit, but you can see we go together the opposites of each of the fingers. So if we go together and we stick the pinky fingers together there, try and get back a little bit, and then touch the tips with the thumbs. So that represents the sun and the moon, if you will. And then the two ring fingers here touch each other on each side. And then the middle fingers go around and pull a little bit. And then the index fingers take the tip of that and pull. And then what we have is the whole thing here. You can see it pretty well. Okay, move it around just a little bit so you can see how it's attached and so forth. So it's a fairly easy one to do. And so that is a good thing to learn how to do that. So a mandala can also be a symbolic circular figure representing the universe. It's often depicted in Thangka paintings. You'll see these large circles and various kinds of figures and so forth associated with that. In addition, the body itself can be seen as a mandala, as can any beautiful object. So you can just imagine anything that you have to be a mandala. It doesn't even have to be round as far as that goes. So then everything can be imagined as a Buddha field within that mandala. Even meditation and mind can be seen as a mandala. There's a body mandala as well. So for this practice, you'll focus on the hand mudra and the symbolism associated with that. To do this, hold your hands in front, palms up, fingers spread out, and then interlock the fingers as I was illustrating, and with the small fingers, then use the thumbs to take hold of the tips of those, and then the opposite, and then forming the two circles as a part of that for the sun and the moon. And then the two ring fingers in the center, and then the two other fingers from the opposite hand go in together and form and what is then referred to as the four mountains. So each of these is a mountain, each of these is a mountain, in addition to being the sun and the moon. So that's the symbolism associated with doing this. So the two straight fingers in the middle, the center is Mount Meru, I think I mentioned already, the center of the universe. And then the four connecting fingertips represent the four continents that surround Mount Meru in the traditional view in India. Some descriptions, the circles formed by the thumbs and small fingers represent the sun and moon, but not all. Some just don't include the sun and the moon in their descriptions. So these are the same as in the 7-point mandala offering. So to make the actual offering, we recite the prayer, the offering mantra, which is counted for repetitions. Again, that little clicker is very handy for that. However, I recommend you do as many repetitions as you can during 2 daily sessions in 1 week. And so there's not just a mudra, but there's a mala, a mantra, that is also associated with this. So what you're doing is you're counting mantras and you're repeating the mudra with each of those. So the description is in the book there. This is number 19 of our practices. And as with all of these, we began with practice twice daily, and then our intention. I intend to practice for the benefit of all sentient beings, or whatever other personal intention that you have. And then we recite the refuge vow, a short one, the one in the text, or some other one. And then the actual offering, the description that is given in the book for that. We reappear as Vajrasattva. Remember that we were in Vajrasattva in the last practice, and so in terms of continuity, we reappear as Vajrasattva from the last practice. And then we make offerings with this hand mudra described in the text and as I just went through. And then there is a little prayer that is recited as a part of this. This is a little different than is always done. So there's various prayers that can be used for this purpose, but it's a nice simple prayer. It begins, Om Ah Hong. By offering this fine and pleasing mandala, may obstacles not arise on the path to liberation. May the intention of the sagatas of the 3 times be realized, and without being confused by the cycle of existence or dwelling in stillness of body, speech, and mind, may beings throughout space be liberated. So it's a wonderful little speech that you can get. You don't have to repeat that each time. It's like the refuge vow. You do it at the beginning. And then it has the mandala. And it begins, again, with Om Ah Hom. It's a very universal kind of a mantra. And then Maha Guru Dewa Dakini Ratna Mandala Mega Puja Samudra Saparana Samaya Ahom. Okay, so you'll need to be able to look at that. So look in the book. You can write it down as a part of that. And we repeat that. That's what we count as many times as we can. And so you could just hold on to the mudra as a part of that, or you can let go of them. And oftentimes we snap off both of our fingers as we do that, and then go into the next one as you're reciting the mudra, and just keep doing that over and over. And at the end of however many of those you're able to do in your practice, go ahead and then do the dedication, the short one, by the merit of this practice, may I attain liberation for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so then post-meditation, once we are complete, do however many you have time to do in your morning, your afternoon, or if you've got other sessions during the day. And then we make mental offerings of any special or valuable object you'd observe during your daily activities. So anything can be viewed as making an offering. And this is one of the things that I learned very early on. It might be handy to keep a clicker with you if you're making these offerings and including those in numbering, but you don't have to follow this by a strict numbering approach, as we have talked about. But we do these things over a period of time, and then we do them every day for the rest of our life. So we do these and make opportunities. Everything you see, here's a little statue. Okay, make offerings to the statue. And over here is a Thangka painting. I make offerings to the figure in the Thangka painting. Or, gee, here's a pretty flower. I make offerings to that pretty flower, and so forth. But you have to kind of memorize the mantra as you're reciting that. So it helps to have a copy of it handy as you're doing that, particularly in the beginning. But once you've done many of these, then it becomes more natural. So let's go ahead and practice this. This is going to be a very short session today. You've got some time, we can go ahead and do some practice as a part of this. If you have the book, you might want to look at the text so you can follow along with that. If you don't, just listen and pass it through mentally. So, Om Ah Hong, by offering this fine and pleasing mandala, may obstacles not arise on the path to liberation. May the intention of the sagatas of the 3 times be realized, and without being confused in the cycle of existence or dwelling in the stillness of body, speech, and mind, may beings throughout space be liberated. Om Ah Hong Mahaguru Dewa Dakini Ratna Mandala Buddha Mega Samudra Samaya Ahom. Okay, and we can do it again then. Om Ah Hong Mahaguru Dewa Dakini Ratna Mandala Mega Puja Samudra Saparana Samaya Ahom. This one's a little bit different than what I do. Om Ahong Mah Guru Dewa Dakini Ratna Mandala Mega Puja Samudra Saparana Samaya Ahong. Okay, so that's 3 times, but you can do that over and over and continue to do that as a form of meditation. Okay, so as you do your morning meditation, your evening meditation, whatever other one, or as I mentioned, once you've memorized the offering mantra, you can do it with all kinds of other things that you encounter during the day. And if you feel like maybe doing the mudra is a little bit too much to do in public, then that's fine. You can do it mentally. You can imagine that as you recite the mantra, and you can recite the mantra without actually saying it out loud as well. So don't let these little things get in your way of doing the practice. You want to be generous. Altruistic generosity is one of the key teachings of the 7-limb prayer. It's part of the teachings of the Buddha. It's part of the teachings in everything all the way up through Dzogchen. So very important to have that sense of generosity to help and benefit all beings to the best of our ability. So then I did the demonstration of the plate with the 7 aspects on doing that particular offering. And I showed you a little bit with the rings of the approach that is done in the more elaborate version of that. Just a couple of tips about that. I did include the example in the invitation today, so you should have a copy of this as well. And so this represents the different rings. So it starts with a base, and so then you put on the ones around that, and then the 4 main directions. So you can see it's got letters on the outside edge. So here's the one for the base, the east, and then we go around that to the south, the north, and the west. Okay, but there's also a little box around that side that gives them that little bit of an explanation. And so it says in the bottom one here, it is Mount Meru, the 4 continents. So that's what's included in there. So this one puts Mount Meru in first in the center, and then it goes down to the east, south, west, and north. And so there's the other kinds of things that can be included here. And the other box that is included here as a part of this is symbolism of this. So the 100-syllable mantra is assumed as a part of that. Saffron water, the ground, and the Vajra fence. Now, these are all things that we'll get into in more detail as we move into Tantra, but that is some of the symbolism that is a part of that. And then the second one is also in the base, but you can see here that the figures are intermediate, and there's 2 of them in each of those areas. And so there's one in the center, just like this one here, but then over here there's one above and below that. And so these are the 8 subcontinents. So each of those mountains that are around the outside have a subcontinent on either side of that. And so the numbers, starts with ones, you can see that they are in bold. And those start with the 8, and then 9, and then you do 10 and 11 and so forth. And you go around these. So here on this side, it's 8, 9. It starts at the bottom. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, 13. So the order of them is a bit unusual, but that's the way that those are listed. And then the next one, then coming back over to this side, are the four that are kind of in between just a little. You can see it's a little bit closer to the center here. And the text says these are the four treasures. So the jewel mountain, a wish-fulfilling tree, a holy cow, and no toil grain. Get the grain without any effort. So these are the treasures, and so those are symbols of what's being offered. And then we go on to the other side, and we see that somewhat inside of those, get this up where you can see it here, we go around, and here it jumps around again in a different pattern. So we go from 18, 19, 20, 21, and then we go to 22, 23, 24, and 25 over here. Got you off the screen there a little bit. And those are the 8 goddesses. So they represent all of those. The goddess of graceful garlands, song, dance, flowers, incense, radiant light, fragrant water. So those are all of the things that are being imagined as a part of this offering. And then the third row down here, so what we're doing is, I forgot to mention, so the first two were in the base, that is an upside down bowl. And then we go to, that continues on into the third one. But then we put the first ring around what has been collected on that, and then continue with these two going around. And then we go add a second ring. Now, sometimes there's not enough of whatever the rice or the stones or whatever it is, based on what we've already done. And so we may need to add a little bit more to bring it up to the top of that. And then, so then we have the second ring over here, and this one is the 7 royal articles. So these are the wheel, jewel, queen, minister, elephant, steed, general, and treasure vase. And so we put all of those on there. And then we add up, we put on the third ring on top of that. Again, you might have to fill that in just a little bit as you're going. And the third ring just has 4 of those. You can see the way that they're laid out there, if I can get it in the middle. And so it goes from this side straight across. So it's 34, 35, then up to the top, 36, and 37 back down. So it's helpful to have these diagrams because the order of them kind of bounces around just a little bit as a part of that. These symbolize the sun, the moon, the banner, and parasol. Okay, so those all go down to 35. So we've included 35. We're missing one, 36. Where's 36? Well, 36 is this little symbol that goes on the top. So once everything else is done, then we go to 36, which is added on to the top to symbolize the completion of the offering. So I'll give you just a little bit of background in terms of that and how you can do that kind of thing. So if you're interested in doing it, you can purchase one of those and get a nice big bag of rice or stones or whatever that you'd like to use for that purpose. And it can be a nice way to do offerings as a part of your practice, but it's not one that's absolutely essential. The most essential ones are actually the ones that are in your mind. Okay, so that completes that for this week. We've gone through all of the different standard kinds of offerings that we make as a part of our practice. We continue on going back through the preliminary practices that we've already done as a part of that. So it's becoming a more complete set of practices. You don't have to do a lot of repetitions in the other ones as a part of that, but then you do more repetitions in this one as a part of the final part of the practice. So that's it for this week. If you have any questions about that, look in the book or send me a question, and we can send you back a reply or bring it to you next week in our practice. And the next week concludes these, we're referred to as uncommon preliminaries. And we're going to continue with Guru Yoga, which is one of the most important of all of the practices in Tibetan Buddhism, particularly the Nyingma lineage. The other major lineages sometimes have slight variations to that, but that will be the one that we are focused upon. And that's the final part of these preliminary practices. But as I've said before, we don't stop doing the preliminary practices. Of course, there are ways of doing them in which you do a certain number, like the 100,000 of each of them that we have talked about previously. Or there are things based on time. You do a certain number of them for a certain time and so forth. Or you do them until you have just mastered them. And usually that is dependent upon your teacher telling you, yeah, that's enough. But what we have decided to do organizationally is that we do much like that second one, except for one thing. Because lay practitioners typically don't have the amount of time as the monastic community to do these, most of us are not going to go on a 3-year retreat to help complete all of these. And so what we can do is do them. We're going through the ones in the class. You can continue doing those as you go through the other parts of this. You'll find that the texts begin with those practices, and that's the best way to begin. I start every day my practice with the Nundro practices. And then we go on from that into whatever other practices, and we'll be getting into Tantra next as a part of that. And so these are the elements that bring us to that point. But Guru Yoga next time is one of the most important of all of those. And a lot of masters even say it is the practice. So important to understand and include that as a part of your practice, even if you don't do that as the major part of your practice, because we'll have other things to look into as well as a part of that. So please, in the meantime, abide softly and deeply in pure awareness with loving kindness, compassion for all beings, always and always. Thank you very much.